Hello, and welcome to Have You Got Your Shit Together with me, Caitlin O'Ryan, the podcast that celebrates not having your shit together. On today's episode, we have Louise Hale, aka Curly Wordy. She's a Cockney spoken word poet, play therapist, and author who refers to her tongue as her paintbrush. She's driven by the healing power of words and the unsung stories that live in all of us. Her poetry draws on lived experience to shine a light on brave narratives that speak of thriving through adversity, healing from trauma, finding voice in feelings, and all the ups and downs in life that builds our bones. Louise draws on a multitude of skill sets, community journalism, teaching, and therapy to fuel her poetry. As a poet, she has performed headline gigs across the capital, and as a play therapist, she supports children and young people with their mental health and well-being. She recently performed for Women's Refuge alongside a choir. She's worked with Kings College and UCL on poetry commissions and led a campaign for children's mental health with the movement Thrive London. This is such a beautiful episode. Louise has such a warmth and a way with words that I found myself just wanting to listen to her talk. We do talk a lot about bereavement and the profound effect losing her mum has had on her, so go lightly into this episode if it might be something that resonates with you. I hope that hearing Louise talk about her grief so eloquently might also be of comfort for anyone who is living with grief. She also talks about her new book, Hurricane Brain, which she wrote to support bereavement in children. She very kindly left a copy with me for one of our listeners, so if it's something that you would like, please give us a message on Instagram and we'll do a little draw or something to decide who can get it. And if you stay until the end of the episode, you'll be able to hear one of Curly Wordy's poems, which she was kind enough to send us, called The Road to the Brains We Live In. I hope you enjoy the episode. Here's Curly Wordy. Made it into my little living room.
Yeah. Lovely little fairy lights.
Yeah. So was this kind of close to where you grew up then?
Yeah, it's very close. It's an interesting story. Mm-hmm. I always thought that I was born in the Royal London.
Okay.
Which is obviously in Whitechapel.
Yeah.
But I was actually born, my mum was originally from Kent. My father's from Stepney Green in the East End and still lives there to this day.
Yeah.
And my parents spent a very little time. I was conceived in the East End.
Okay.
But then my parents spent a little bit of time living in Leytonstone.
Right.
And then I was born in Whipps Cross, and then my parents moved across to Bow, where I lived up until I was 19, until I went to uni.
Okay.
So I was brought up in Tower Hamlets. So that's why when people refer to being born within the sound of the Bow Bells, it means you're a Cockney. Wow. But yeah, Leytonstone, until recently, I was living here for 11 years.
Wow.
And it's interesting that I did end up living there. And when I first moved to Leytonstone, it was not long after my mum had passed, and I asked my dad to drive me to the road that they shared a flat on, just so I could have a look at just so I could imagine and envision what Leytonstone would have been like then.
Yeah. And
it's interesting how being here made me feel close to her, even though it wasn't a conscious choice. But I just ended up living in Leytonstone. Gosh. So yes, it is near here, and it is near to Tower Hamlets, and the East End, the East in general, is an area that I love.
Yeah.
Very proud to be an East Ender.
Yeah. I feel like it's rare now to kind of meet people who are truly from the East End or
very
London.
True. Yeah,
know.
In recent years, following a journey of a lot of holistic healing, I've started to clear my kind of what I feel was negative mindset, and I've started to set clearer intentions. And I do believe in gifts from the universe. I do, you know. And this particular opportunity I was given recently
with UCL,
I put out to the universe that I wanted to explore the story of the Cockney, because I was a Cockney myself, and Cockneys by their very nature are real storytellers, and I grew up immersed in language, and I often refer to my tongue as my paintbrush, because I didn't find reading easy at all growing up as a kid, but speaking I did. And the East End was rich with language, and language was art, and to me I was immersed in art.
That's
people
amazing.
Art, right? So I want to explore that, and I had put that out a lot to the universe, and then I got I applied for this public arts funding thing I saw in East London, and I put a proposal forward, went along to this like meet and greet where there was researchers there, but I didn't get through to the second round. But I did meet an art curator at this event that said, you'd be great for this project about East London. I'm going to put you in touch with this other woman. So I linked up with this woman, and lo and behold, they're doing this project called The Voices of East Bank, and it's all to do with the voices of the 4 neighbouring boroughs around the East End, and like the new part of Stratford that's obviously seen a change in Newham.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to draw on some of my journalistic skill and poetry skills and go in and interview people that live within certain parts of East London about their story. And it's for a thing called Newham Archive, where it's going to be available from Stratford Library. BBC History are going to use some of it.
Amazing.
And UCL wanted to do it. And I ended up meeting with these people. We put loads of ideas into the pot. We co-created, and they offered to get me on board, and I've been one of their main workshop facilitators, paid work, and we've ended up going in with similar equipment to this, interviewing people just about their stories, and it's really reconnected me with the reason why I first became a journalist, because growing up in the East End, I had an old soul, and I always noticed people that had a lot of humility but had hardship. And to me, there was a lot of stories in people of the everyday, and I would walk around and I'd see people struggling, but they held their head up so high, or they had really clean homes, or they still were really proud.
Yeah.
And they were just, they were just rich with story, and but they didn't see themselves as a story. They didn't value the stories they carried. And that led me into journalism. So I could local journalism in Tower Hamlets, and I worked predominantly for a newspaper that covered Tower Hamlets, and I used to do a lot of features articles, and they were my favourites, where I'd interview people about, maybe they run the marathon with only one leg, or perhaps there was like 5 generations of family that got cancer and they all survived, and whatever it was, and then you would tell their story of defying the odds.
Yeah.
And shining a light on that for me was huge. And at the time, I wasn't ready to look at my own story, so shining a light on theirs was safe projection. Mm-hmm. But through shining a light on all these stories of hardship, I was able to see that my own story had been really hard. And when I was ready to look at it, I eventually did. So that kind of idea that the East End is rich with story and rich with Cockneys, and Cockneys, the diaspora there is so rich, like the history is so rich, and I'd love to do a project just about Cockney. And so the project manager that I've been working with has said to me, you know what, we'll look into it as an idea, and if you need help and there's a way to find funding, I'll point you in the right direction. Yeah. Watch this space. Yeah. There may be a Cockney project from Cockney Curly Wordy, but I'd like to do it. It would have meaning for me. Yeah. And so back to what you're saying, because I've gone round the houses, because us Cockneys we do. But the idea of the common Londoner has gone, I think. And so when people talk about Cockneys dying, which is a topical debate at the minute, to be a Cockney is a spirit, is a way of life. So therefore, if you go to Tower Hamlets and you go into a shop and you chat to a Bangladeshi shopkeeper, and he tells you that he was born there and he's got a Cockney accent, or he hasn't got a very Cockney accent, but he was born there, sound of the Bow Bells, he is a Cockney. So it's not that it's a type of person. Yeah. It's not a race. It's a spirit being Cockney, and it's if you're born within the sound of a certain area. But the idea of the common Londoner, I think, which was often associated with Cockney, is on the decline, and I really do want to look at it, and if there's anyone out there that wants to look at it with me, come on down, we could do it together, but no, I'd like to.
But it's kind of what we were, just before the podcast started, what we were saying about, like, how growing up in London gives you a certain, like, rhythm or, like, attitude or drive to life that I think you don't get in other places. And for me, someone who's moved to London can really feel the difference from where I've come from in terms of the pace of it. And
I think London is like, my early memories of London, East London, growing up in Bow were beautiful memories of freedom, and playing out on my bike, my BMX, and it held such high currency, that BMX. But, it was the one thing, and for all, when I think about my parents' marriage and how it wasn't very good, and there were many things my father struggled with, but one thing my dad was great at, like if my bike ever got nicked, or my like rollerblades or my roller skates ever got nicked, he'd replace them instantly. He knew I loved. He knew I had this need to be very out and be playing out a lot. And I would be out for hours and hours, and people would knock for me, and we'd go cycling. I've got very vivid memories of often cycling alone, and just that feeling of freedom, cycling out in the rain. Like my favourite memories are when you'd just get a downpour and it'd be pissing rain, and I'd put one of those bubble gum, like you know when you get like the lemon screwball from the ice cream van, you put one in the back of your tyre and it would make a loud sound.
No.
And I would just ride for hours and it would just be so thrilling. And you know, when you think about personal geography and you think about visual representations of belonging, and how, you know, the going out in your community, understanding the demographics, understanding the geography of where you live, kids learn from a young age. And when I look back, I was really, you know, even though there was things I wasn't strong and confident with, I was really confident with understanding my little estate and my little area of Bow, you know, which I really believe set me up to have more confidence to venture out later on.
Yeah.
And go and explore a wider map.
Yeah.
You know, so beautiful memories of freedom, rich with people that just... The East End for me once was a place where people would go knowing they had an opportunity to make something of themselves. So if they had little, they could... You know, there was a lot of wheeler dealing that would go on. Like, I've got a really vivid memory of my dad coming home once, and my dad... There was a row in our living room, and it was full of, like, leather Del Boy jackets. And me and my sister were really young, right? And we were like, what on earth is this? Like, you know... And people would like knock and go, hello, I'm just here to try on the fur coat, you know, whatever it was, right? And they'd come into our living room. Yeah, they'd come into our living room and they'd be trying on these leather jackets, and, you know, and they'd buy them. And there was a real, look, thinking about both my parents, there was a real hand-to-mouth existence, but there was a way of being entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And there's a poem I've written called What's a Free Word Worth? And there's a line in it where I say, when you ain't got money, you've got ideas. And I think when the East End was somewhere where people could go and, you know, birth ideas, and they would make money and they would survive. So their survival skills were phenomenal. Yeah. And I think survival is what powers drive. You know, knowing if you've got no choice, you've got to find a way to survive. Yeah. It feeds your drive, and not taking anything away from people that don't have hardship or don't have, or have, maybe they're born into a bit of money. You know, good luck to them. It's you know, life is life. But I do think you can't buy a drive for that reason, because some people who have really nothing will have like the most incredible entrepreneurial skills. Some people go on and achieve it, but you meet a lot of people that don't. Yeah. The opportunity's not there for them, and that's sad. Yeah. Because it's just based on circumstance of money. Yeah. You know, not ideas, not wealth. And when you saw me at the Word Soul gig, you know, there's a line in my new piece that I'm working on. It's not finished yet, but where I say, the budget you live on doesn't determine your brain's value or discipline. You know, and it doesn't. No. You know, but I think that if you haven't got money, you're restricted. You know, and I met a lot of people that, you know, could have been. Someone
said to me that, and it's really stayed with me, that money buys you choice.
It does, yeah.
It buys you options.
It does, yeah.
So it's
that's
not
one of the lines from Mummisms.
that
I've got, where I say, where my mum used to say, money, it doesn't breed happiness, it gives you choice, and often those without it have to shout with a louder voice. Yeah. And it's true, you know, and it does, of course, it gives you calm. Yeah. It gives you clarity, it gives you options. Yeah. Yeah. And it gives you the chance to say, right, I'm not, it gives you power, it gives you control. You know, so it gives you a lot, but often there can be this misunderstanding that perhaps poor people aren't happy. Yeah. You know, and I've been to places where people have nothing and they've got a really rich life. Yeah. You know, full of the things that make them feel great, you know. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, money's got a lot to answer for, isn't it? True. You know, it really has. But, the East End, I'd always encourage anyone to go there. My stepdad gave me a great bit of advice, which was always, when you're in the East End, always look up. because the buildings are beautiful, which they are, and the buildings tell their own story.
Wow.
And you will walk around and see such beauty just based on the kind of architecture of the East End.
Yeah.
And I think it's changed, and it's changing where big money's coming in, big developments coming in.
High-rise
flats, business, are coming in. Like that new place, like the new part of Stratford's, I can understand why some people are frightened by change. It will bring goodness. To me, the East End was always seen as like the armpit of London, and I lived there, and to me it wasn't the armpit. It was right on the cuff of the city, and it always deserved its glory. Right, and it is getting its glory now, but of course there always is that danger then that certain people will get pushed out. Yeah, but it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
Some of those people will be happy to go, you know, because I've met people where they grew up in the East End, their family made good, and then they moved out to somewhere like Chigwell or Woodford, and then they lived there for a while, and then their family made even better, and they moved out to Kent or Essex or Surrey, and to them that is progression out.
Yeah.
Not everyone wants to stay in inner city areas, you know, especially if you've been born into it and you haven't had... or you've come there to make a better life for yourself and you haven't had the money and all of a sudden you do, people are then going to choose to live elsewhere. So there will be some people that are happy to go as well. But yeah, it's a great place, East London, and I think, I'm always biased, but I think East Londoners are the most friendliest. I beckon any one of your listeners to say otherwise.
They remind me the most of northern people.
Well, actually, I remember when I went to uni in Manchester, I got in a cab and I was a little bit... merry at the time, and this cab driver said to me, "You can't be like Southerner, you're so friendly." You know, are you sure? And I'm like, you know, and I loved Manchester. I definitely felt like I belonged there, but you know, I love a chatty person. I love
There's
a person.
plenty of that in the north. Okay, so Lou, on a scale of shit to together, how are you feeling today?
Oh wow, God, you caught me at a good point in life. I'd say I'm 50-50.
50-50.
50-50 on that.
Why is that?
Because I'm in a place at the moment where I've moved. I'm spending a bit of time recent move
Margate.
to the seaside, Margate, old Margs. And what's nice about that, what drove that decision, is I'd been a teacher for 10 years, the last decade, and I loved what teaching gave me, but I realised about 6 years in that I couldn't work in a classroom of 30 kids anymore, and when I was really noticing that emotions, well-being and mental health were really desperately needing focus. Schools do their best, and I was fortunate I worked at a school that did their utmost best to support the emotional development of kids, but sometimes the funding isn't there. But I struggled. I've always had a soft spot for children who have social deprivation, and I don't even myself like the word deprivation, because Tower Hamlets was often referred to it as that, and I didn't see my area that I grew up like that. Right? But you see children with emotional upset, emotional challenges, and I was that kid. I came from that kind of family. I was very loved, but sometimes you can still have hardship and chaos that rocks your world as a child. So I really resonated with those kids, because I was that kid once, and maybe I could have benefited from early intervention therapy. And so it sent me off on a journey to retrain as something called a play therapist, which is a creative arts therapist, and I did a master's in it, and so I've slowly been building up work in that and reducing my days as a teacher. And this July I finally handed my notice in as a teacher after 10 years. Made the jump. Jump into surrendering waters, you know. And I realised I was in a pay trap, and I was using my teaching career to pay for a mortgage, you know, and I was lucky to have a mortgage, but I'd only come to own property because my mother had died. So really I'd never had if my mum was still alive, I'd be in rented accommodation now, you know, but this situation presented itself, and I did buy a flat, but the mortgage was huge and the interest rates were doubling, and so I just had to get out of the trap of it, because I felt like the the chokehold of the financial burden was stopping me from having enough clearing
space
and clarity to really ask myself what it is that I wanted.
Yeah.
So I moved to Margate, and my mum was originally from Kent. So again, there's that link, Leytonstone, the East End, and all of a sudden I find myself being drawn to Kent. I used to go to Margate as a kid. I've still got some cousins that live in Kent, and it's been a big jump. But I'm renovating a property there, and all I'm doing at the moment is I've got all different sorts of builders' numbers in my phone. I'm like, who's Jimmy and who's Tom and who's Mark and who's, oh my God, who's this fella? I mean, God, if someone checked my phone, they'd be like, bloody hell, you're keen.
So many gentlemen callers.
Who are these gentlemen callers? Yeah, it says Mark the Sparky, and and then many plumbers, and you just think, so I'm in this place where I'm trying to navigate a big decoration, because I've got no hot water, no heating at the moment, and I'm camping down on my floor on a sofa bed, and it's all cool. But I'm trying to keep it buoyant so it continues. So I'm hopefully within a month, I'm living and I've got a decorated living room and I've got a sofa that I can sit on. So at the moment I'm sitting on camping chairs.
Oh my God. Humbling.
I've got no kitchen. Right, I'm using a camping stove, an air fryer and a kettle.
Wow.
I'm going to my mates for showers.
Yeah.
My armpit hairs are like 2.5 inches long. I should have done a grow-a-thon. I should have done like a sponsorship so I could have donated the money to someone, right? But so that's what I mean by I know where I'm going. Because I know within a couple of months I'll land, I'll feel grounded. I really hope I can take my aspirations of, because a lot of some people that will listen to this will know I recently published a book on bereavement in memory of my mum, and that's my first one. But I've got two. I've got another one that's finished, but I'd like to do a second book for kids again. And there's another idea I've got to support ADHD again, another idea. But I'm someone through life, because of that drive and because of that early chaos, I can go into like hypo drive and hypo overachieving, and that is a trauma response. That is a trauma response to early chaos, and there could have been worse things. And I've been someone that's always been addicted to overachieving, and there was points when I recognised it and then I could stop. So I looked at my life and realised that I wasn't trapped, but I had to make changes, and it meant moving, and it wasn't an easy decision leaving London, because London's like a friend, an old friend to me. But I realised that I'd be able to, reduce my bills drastically, have clarity and be able to breathe, literally breathe better by the sea. Have time to write more, build my business in play therapy. London will still be on my doorstep. I can come in when I need to, like I'm here now. And also I really want to try and write a spoken word play, and and I'm one of those people that about the East End, and I'm one of those people that if I don't try, I'll only get pissed off with myself, and then there's no one else to get pissed off at. So when you ask me if I've got my shit together, well, at the moment I'm living out of laundry bags. Got I don't know, me arse for my tit some days. I don't know where my toothbrush is. So that's the shit I haven't got together. But it seems to be flowing all right. Right. So I know that I'll land okay.
So what does having your shit together mean to you then?
Having my shit together. In an ideal scenario, that when I have had my shit together, is lots of sleep, good rest, understanding that it's okay to nest down and rest and sleep well. Eating well, good nutrition, really listening to what your body needs, staying hydrated. I get obsessed. I've got these little books like healing foods, and I love aromatherapy. So I like making sure that if I'm feeling a little bit sore in the back, or if I've got a sore throat, I'll look in my little book and I'll make myself a little tonic. And I've got in later years, like once I hit I'm in my early 40s now, but 35 on. That's when I started to really get into all that. So having my shit together is having enough time in the day where I wake up and I can really be present when I cook. So I can enjoy prepping food, and it's a gift to my body, you know. So, because to me, good nutrition, your body, you know, it really, if you've got to feel safe in your body in order to feel grounded and balanced. So to give your body good food and to be blessed enough and to be grateful enough to have the money to buy the food you want, you know, to me is I feel grateful for that, you know. So having that time to prep some food, even if it's food prepping and you freeze it, but feeling like it's a small win that, you know, like you've just,
it's very grounding, isn't it? Like
made some
being in the flow of
like good food. Later on, like when I started to get into like holistic healing, like I love a good sound gong and sound baths, and sometimes I you know, I haven't done it for a while, but I used to enjoy a good like silent disco or a static dance. But I've really got into like learning about the archetypal cycles of the feminine, and I really am a believer now that you understanding a woman's kind of cycle through life, like the seasons. So now, like I was born on New Year's Day, and I've always been a winter child.
Wow.
Like, and there's a poem that I don't often read very often, and it's called Photosynthesize Me, and it's about my relationship with nature. And there's a line in it where I say, we met in the winter, do you remember? The release from the warm bud of my mother's womb, your snow-capped features consumed my blank canvas, and you taught me that even cold things are lovable, you know. And it's this idea that I was born into the winter, and so I love the winter, and I've come to understand that it's really an important season for nesting down and hibernating. My surname's Hale, and I often call myself Hedgehog Hale in the winter, right? But I really honour that now, and I wouldn't have once. This is what
you fight against it.
Yeah, now I do sit myself down, like old Joe Dispenza says, and I do say to my body, stop, rest, sleep. You know, be warm, have that extra 30 minutes in bed. Try and read, because sometimes if I get really flighty, I don't read, and I've got all these lovely books that I want to read.
It's like the first thing to go, isn't it? Yeah.
So focus for me is having my shit together. Focus, having clear ideas, not achieving too much in a day, but having, as I said, small wins. And one of those wins has to be looking after yourself. A very good friend of mine who started out as a healer, I'm a keen lover of reflexology, and it's the only thing for me that turns off my pituitary gland, because our pituitary glands, can never say the word properly, but you can secrete a lot of energy, and you can adrenaline, you can overproduce that adrenaline. And when I have reflexology, she literally can turn that tap off for me, and I will just like completely go floppy, and I'll go home and sleep. And I since kind of understanding that side of myself and knowing when I need to rest, with this woman I devise like little mantras sometimes and little rituals that I do. So if I'm feeling tired or my legs are feeling tired, I'll massage my legs, and I'll with a really nice oil, and I'll almost thank them. Thank you, legs, for carrying me. You know, because there was a point in life where I really didn't like my legs because they're quite heavy set for my shape. So I had a bad relationship with them, and so even just like touching yourself and saying, oh, legs, you've carried me, haven't you, for so long? Yeah, you know, it sounds crazy, but I do. You know, I do, and so that's having my shit together, being present in my body, having clarity, gratitude, so I can actually make my visions come true. And I've always believed in myself, and I've always believed in what I believe. We all have a project that is ourself, and I've never given up, even in times when I had feelings of angst and anger, and I had resentment towards my past. I always knew that there was a better horizon, and I always pushed towards it, and I was always looking to self-develop, to understand myself, in the hope that I would eventually arrive on calmer shores, and I have. And I think that is having my shit together, not giving up on living a more contented, blissful existence.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so before the podcast, I asked you to think of an object that makes you feel like you've got your shit together.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, and I bought it.
You brought it?
And I don't want you to think it's a little plug. And it isn't a plug. But I was going to leave you a copy so one of your listeners,
Oh my gosh.
could tweet or could message you. But it's my book that I've written in memory of my mum, because I do feel like this signifies that I have my shit together.
Oh, absolutely.
And the reason being is I wrote Hurricane. It's called Hurricane Brain, and I wrote it on the 10th anniversary of my mum's death.
Yeah.
And I, up to that point, I hadn't picked up a pen for 8 years. I'd not written a thing. I'd stopped reading newspapers. I'd fallen out of love with a form of expression that for many years was the bollocks to me, was like the kingpin. Yeah. And I wrote from the age of like 10, you know. And at the time I wasn't, like I said to you earlier, reading didn't come easy to me. I'm certain I could have dyslexia. I didn't, like me and predictive text, we just don't get along. Like, I'm always having to like correct something that I've said, and you could ask some of the poets out there and they'd laugh and go, yeah, when you've texted me it hasn't made sense. And writing was the same, but I had the enthusiasm. I was like, I'll show you I can do it. You know, I was that kind of, I can be better, I will improve. And in my inner critic, I wanted to prove my inner critic wrong as well. And so I wrote poetry from a young age. I was obsessed with Michael Rosen's stuff. I was into all the gory, like, revolting rhymes, if there was bogies, if there was poo, if there was words that didn't make sense. But rhyme to me, I loved. And rhyme is how I learned to read. And I met Michael Rosen recently, and I took a book along that I was gifted at the age of 6 called Quick, Let's Get Out of Here. And it helped me learn to read. And I asked him to sign it, and I explained to him that he was the reason I learned to read, you know. And so the fact that I come from a Cockney background and I grew up hearing sound first, because we learned to read with our ears first, right? Yeah. So Cockney rhythm, Cockney rhyme. Then I loved rhyme, and then I obviously wanted to go into journalism. And I will be honest with you, I was fantastic at drawing out people's stories, but because I'd come from a Cockney background, my grammar wasn't great. And sometimes when I went on to other newspapers, I was sometimes made to feel less of a writer, because sometimes I made little errors. But I was still a great writer. But there was sometimes in ways journalism wasn't creative enough for me, you know, and I'd always been jotting down different ideas. I had loads of notebooks everywhere, but I just fell out of love with it. And as soon as my mum passed, it's like, all I can describe it as is there was the life before she died, and there was the life after, and I never allowed myself to connect with writing for years because it was a pleasurable thing. And it's like I didn't deserve pleasure because she wasn't here to have pleasure. Yeah. And then one day I was doing my play therapy MA, my training, and we'd been reintroduced to journaling. And when I was a kid, I kept loads of diaries. Like, I used to keep a diary called Jude. It even had a name. You know, and this course, it reintroduced us to journaling, and really that's diary keeping. Yeah. And I started to write again, and off the back of that, my mum's anniversary was approaching, and I wrote this book. I wrote it in 3 hours, Hurricane Brain. It's all in poetic verse.
Oh, wow.
And I tweaked it in parts. I went to a couple of like critique workshops in Waltham Forest. A couple of authors said to me, it's great, but I reckon you should give it a bit more of a like beginning, middle and end storyline. It does have a beginning, middle and end, but it's told in poetic verse. And when I think about my spoken word, and when I think about Michael Rosen, and when I think about revolting rhymes and the way I love poetry, I'm not surprised this is a poetic storybook. And it tells the story of a little boy called Keith who wakes up one morning to discover that his mum has gone, and everyone's talking about grief. So he thinks grief is a person. So he gets his raincoat and his binoculars and he goes off to find grief so he can get his mum back. Wow. And it's the journey, it's all metaphors, and it's the journey of like the somatic experience that he goes through in his body, and he doesn't understand what's going on, so he develops a hurricane in his brain because you know, he's really angry. Yeah. So it really calls into question the anger and why kids need to express anger. And when I wrote it on the 10th anniversary, it allowed me to take the edge off the sadness of what she'd missed out on in my life, what she hadn't seen me achieve. And it took the edge off. And I really, at the time, all I knew is as a kid, I always wanted to be an author. And I always wrote stories. And I thought, well, I'm going to try and publish this. And one of my counselling colleagues said to me, you know, this is a really good, what we call therapeutic stories. They're called psychoeducation books, where you address a topic that's difficult, but you do it in a way where it's told through a story.
Yeah.
And what I did is I did my research study in bereavement, and I discovered that a lot of young offenders were bereaved under the age of 10. So 40% of young offenders are bereaved under the age of 10. And obviously a lot of people in prison are men. So the reason I chose to make it a little boy is because I want boys to be able to feel like they can express their feelings when they lose something in life, be it the loss of a sibling that, you know, dies, or be it the loss of a parent relationship that falls apart, be it the loss of a toy that meant the world to them. Loss does impact us in many ways, or as in this case, the loss of a parent.
Yeah.
So I turned it into a self-help book. I doubled it up as I put guidance at the back.
Amazing.
And there's 10 activities you can do.
That's so beautiful. Wow.
10 activities that you can do to support your child through grief. And I just thought to myself, I believe in me. I'm going to do this. This could help someone. And then I just kind of chucked my weight behind a Kickstarter campaign. I got a video ready.
Yeah.
I followed the formula of previous campaigns that had managed to secure the money, and I just chucked myself into it. And the moment the campaign went live, and the Cockney in me just went, right, I've got to make this money, the drive again, the hypo drive. And I did, and I ended up raising like just under 6k, and I asked for 5.
God, wow.
And I had 40 days to do it, and it's just been printed. And a lot of the backers, the main drivers were word of mouth, but Instagram and Facebook. Instagram number 2, Facebook number 3.
Wow.
And the main, you know, there's a lot of backers out there. Like, this was due to be finished in around February, so it's gone over, and but it's finally turned up on my door. 12 boxes printed.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm about to get it ready to send out to the backers.
How amazing.
And so this project, from beginning to end, I've transformed an idea into existence. This says to me, you've got your shit together.
Absolutely.
And don't ever forget that this started as an idea. And it was a doodle in a book where I was like drawing the hurricane.
Oh my God.
And I found this incredible illustrator who lived in Georgia, and she illustrated it for me. And
oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
and she was very committed. And during the process, one of her parents died during the process of her making it, and her mother got ill too.
It's so amazing, because like I feel like often with young people and children, we're scared to have conversations and frank conversations about these overwhelming emotions because you don't want to overwhelm them. But actually, when the time comes that like tragedy strikes or something, it's so important that they're equipped with
most definitely.
language.
There's a little bit in here where I say near the end, there's a bit here where I say, months have passed now, and Dad thinks I need to see a doctor for hearts to mend the broken parts. I live, eat, breathe this loss. Grief has become my boss. Inside, I'm hurting. Why can't anybody see I've lost a piece of me? You know, and it's this idea that actually, you know, you need to be able to talk about your heart's, the stories, the pain you carry in your heart. And kids cognitively develop at a different rate, developmentally. So for instance, if a child loses a parent young and they're 8, cognitively they'll be 8, but developmentally they may be 8, they may be 6 by the time they're 10, because the bereavement has knocked their emotional age back. So developmentally you can be performing in a younger age bracket. And so children more so look like they're coping, but it's just disassociation. The overwhelm has made them go blank a bit. And they're just kind of walking around, when people refer to it as like autopilot, it is. And it's recognising it, because you'll get people in schools that, you know, that will say, oh, that child, you know, has got autism, or that child's in care and they really need help, or that child's just lost their dad, but he's coping so well. and actually the child is not coping. They're desperately needing someone to explain a phenomenon, a life-death situation that doesn't make sense to their 10-year-old brain.
Yeah.
And that's where books like this come in, because storybooks are safe projection. So you could read this book or any book to a child about any theme: anxiety, suicide, depression. All those books are out there, and the child can ask questions in a safe relationship. Like if it's your auntie or your mum or your favourite TA or your teacher, and you can ask questions, and they will start to make sense that life and death is a normal part of life. And I think in schools we owe it to kids to introduce the life and death situation much more clearly to kids, other than saying this is a living thing, this is a non-living thing, this is a plant, this is an insect. Actually having a dialogue about our bodies and how sometimes they just do stop working, and giving children the benefit of the doubt that they have the capacity to understand that. And then you're kind of arming them with emotional intelligence from a younger age, so when they are hit with difficulty they can navigate it a bit better. But
also it's equipping everyone with the language, because actually kind of what you were saying before about when your mum passed away and you noticed a lack of people reaching out to you, like
it was massive.
Often even if you're a teacher and there's a child in your class who loses their parent, maybe the teacher feels tentative about not knowing how to approach the child with that, because they don't want to upset them.
100%. And also we constantly trigger each other. Like in scenarios, it's common in the classroom. It happened to me sometimes. I've seen it happen where a child will come in and they will act in a way that will trigger an adult, and it will trigger the inner child of the adult. And if that adult hasn't process certain things in their life, and that's their choice, they'll have a reactive reaction and they won't understand why. And so we go through life constantly being triggered. You're constantly triggered. And so for people to have something where they can approach little Tommy, or they can approach Sebastian, or whoever the child is, child A, child B, and say, oh look, do you fancy reading this book with me? It's about a boy who, has a hurricane in his brain and he doesn't know what to do about it. Oh, poor Keith, he must feel really, really lost and confused. And, it's a very different dialogue than saying, oh, I heard your dad's died, I'm so sorry. And so it creates a bridge, a platform for conversation, and also honest conversation. Children don't want you to lie. Children just want to know the truth of the matter, and sometimes you, as an adult, you have to feel okay to answer questions honestly, and know that the child deserves that, really. I guess so. It is.
So where can people get that?
Well, that's where I've got my shit together, but I've not quite got my shit together. So the next couple of months is going to be sending out the copies to the backers, there's about 250 backers.
Okay, great.
And then after that, I'm going to aim to get it on Amazon. And do like a KDP version, so it can be downloadable on Kindle.
Amazing.
Hopefully, because that doesn't cost much to do. And it would make sense so people can download for things like Kindles or iPhones. And then also they can message me via my Instagram directly, which is obviously Curly Wordy Official. And some people will know that I did have another account, but it got hacked, so I had to set up a new one, Curly Wordy Official. And then I've got a website, curlywordy.com, and if they message me through there as well, I'd send it. But I will be at gigs. In the coming, whatever comes my way in the next year, I'll always aim to take a few copies to some gigs with me with my little card reader. But just reach out to me, and also reach out to me if you know anyone, a school, a hospice, a hospital, a library that would benefit, because part of the campaign video was that if people backed more than 2 books, I would donate a free copy to a local library or school. And so I've got about 70 copies to donate. So if there's a school out there, or a hospice, or a fostering service, a library that you think would benefit, just DM me and we'll make it happen.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
A time in your life where you felt like you really had your shit together.
That's open to interpretation, isn't it? I felt like I had my shit together when I started to look at my emotional self. Right. I think I'd been someone in life who, growing up in the East End, in the climate of the 80s and the 90s, where men in your family weren't encouraged to talk about their feelings, and women off the back of the era of Maggie Thatcher, if you like, there's a lot of women that were, powering on. And my mum was very emotional, but my mum had her moments of being a bit cold, and my mum had her moments of being closed. And I guess life made her that way because she had to survive. But there was a time when I developed, as we know, we all learn, we're mini-me's of our parents, and I learned those skills. And I spent a lot of my early life, formative years, suppressing my feelings. And because I felt that was what I had to do to get through, and my body did that to get me through hardship. Some emotional upsets in my family that didn't feel safe at the time, I guess, because your body will always respond to unsafe feelings. And it really wasn't until I went to university that I started to open up a bit. But then I medicated a bit with booze, so I still didn't look at my feelings that much. And then I medicated a lot with travelling, and travelling, I became a real travel junkie. But I'd never been able to access much culture young. Like, there was a lot of culture in the East End on my doorstep, social culture, but there wasn't, we weren't privy to many holidays growing up. We went to a lot of seasides on the Essex coast, and we went to a lot of caravans, and I didn't have a proper holiday till I was 13, and my dad took me to a proper Brits abroad Tenerife resort, which was hilarious. So I always had this obsession with South America and this obsession with Australia. So the first place I ever backpacked when I was 21 was South America, and then I did end up living in Oz. So when I finally went off travelling, my relationship with nature started to unravel the masks, and it started to show me that I was safe to look at how I felt. And there's a line in my travel poem where I say, by now you'd made me see that I needed to backpack a different map of my own. And it's this idea that I had to backpack my emotional map. Really, it was when my mum got sick and passed, that was it for me. That was everything imploded. Everything that I'd put a lid on for years, pushing it down. Finally, it just went pop, like Pandora's box. And a lot of people don't want to open that box because they fear the mess. They fear how messy it's going to get. But it didn't get messy. It was just constantly telling myself that I would be able to hold it and own it and be able to support myself at the time. And it was then when I started to see that I had to look at my emotional self, that I'd done everything else in life and I'd achieved my career, I'd achieved my education, I'd built my educational self and my social self, and I'd built my travelling self. But I had an issue with my emotional self, and it was directly impacting my intimate relationships. And there was a reason why I was doing that, because I was keeping myself safe. And then I went on a journey of therapy, and I was that kind of person that never thought I needed therapy. It's the best thing I ever did. Over 10 years I had therapy with many different people. And the best therapy I had was with men, because I didn't have that kind of relationship with my father. So I had two counsellors that ended up being males. Yeah. And that's when I started to get my shit together. That's when I was in a room with men that could listen, that were of fatherly age, and they were holding space for me in a way that, no disrespect for my father, but my father's love language is not listening to my emotions. My father has many love languages, DIY being one of them, and fixing my car being another.
Acts of service.
Acts of service, yeah. But at the time, there was still a bit of anger around him not being able to stand and be that emotional man.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of years angry, and I was knocking on the wrong door. Because we get angry and we want an answer, we want a sorry. But when I directed it away and put it into a more constructive avenue and seeked therapy with a male, it was the best thing I ever did.
That's so interesting.
And it opened, and I had epiphany moments, and that's when I started to get my shit together. When I started to align my all my other selves with my emotional self. And I started to like my emotional self. I started to see that she needed tenderness. I started to see that she needed tending to, you know, that the weeds needed raking away. And those weeds never go away, so they always grow back. But they're there to remind us, you know, what we've been through. And then I started to hold space for myself more and be tender with myself. And then I started to kind of realign with the feminine more, because I'd realised I'd operated a lot from my masculine, because I had to, because in my family home I took on the more fatherly role once my father had gone. There's a thing in counselling called pseudo-maturation, and often when a child is wounded young by any type of trauma, or when a child, in my case, my family unit broke down, there was marital struggles and there was aspects of domestic violence, you know, and when that broke down, often children, when you see children, you think, God, they're really mature for their age. Yeah. It's often because childhood ends for a lot of children when there's early trauma or a traumatic experience, and they step into what they call a pseudo-maturation process, where they will often take on roles of the parenting. It's uncommon to meet children that cook a lot or to try and rescue their parents' emotions a lot. And that happens the world over. It doesn't mean that you're damaged, doesn't mean that you're broken. It just means that a part of your childhood was taken away a little bit and you had to step into a more adult role quite young. Yeah. And it does have its gains, but obviously it doesn't as well. And I stepped into the masculine young. You know, I'd say it wasn't until I started to really get back in touch with my feminine needs, my sensual needs, my intimate needs, that started to come to play when I started to really hold space for my emotions. And that's when I started to get my shit together, So I would beckon anyone out there to never run from your emotional self. Like, hold space for them and soothe yourself if you need to. Yeah. Like, hug yourself. Like, tell your, like there's a line, I've not used it in a poem yet, but I wrote a little, like, doodle, like, amusing. Yeah. And there's a bit where I say, I used to think telling the people I love the most the truth about myself was the hardest thing to do, but it's telling yourself. And when I was truthful with the child that carried me, I was finally able to carry her back. And it's this idea that all that inner child wants is for you to say, fuck me, you did go. Sorry if I'm not allowed to say. Oh, fuck me, you did. Absolutely thank you. You really did go through the shit. And, I'm so sorry that no one was there to really take that on for you. Yeah. But, so sorry, but look at how well you did. But you don't have to do that no more. You're all right now. Yeah. So you're almost talking to that child and saying it's all right. Yeah. And it's a really, powerful thing to do. And that came to bear for me during COVID. When I was at home, I was still a teacher, I was having to do home learning. And I did this 30-day Jay Shetty live meditation thing. And I was going online every day, Jay Shetty's online stuff. And I did this inner child one. And he said to us, look, we're at a crisis, we're in a pandemic where so many people now are questioning what their purpose and passion is. Yeah. I want you to do this meditation with me. And it was an inner child one where you went back to your family home, you embraced your younger self. And it was so vivid for me. And I went back to my home. And that home carried a lot for me, a lot of happy memory, but a lot of sad memory. And I went there and I greeted my little self and I said to her, what don't I do that I used to do, that I loved? And this, which is what he asked us to ask. And she said to me, you always had a notebook and pen and wrote what you saw, and you don't do that no more. Wow. And really it was the start of poetry, but it was the start of her saying to me, where has that part of you gone that loved writing? Yeah. And again, so it started to bring my shit together. I started to bring into line this emotional self and this belief that actually this story that lives in me matters, and I'm going to put it into words that I am comfortable with. It won't be for an article, and it might not be through a perfectly written grammatical book or whatever, or it won't be in an article that will be, by a standard of a newspaper. It's going to be a piece of poetry. And I just started, once that feeling came to me, I started sharing the poems in my WhatsApp groups with my mates. Amazing. And that's when they were like, this shit's good, man. It's going perform some of it. There. Yeah, God. So long-winded answer. But
absolutely not. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, in opposition to that then, a time in your life where you felt like you really didn't have your shit together.
Oddly, you'd think you didn't have your shit together, once upon a time I would have said when my mum passed, but that's when I had to have my shit together. Yeah. I had to have it all sucked and shit together. I was so taught in a way. I mean, I wasn't free of having my shit together, but I had to be very, very
on top of
it.
Yeah.
So there was I think when I didn't have my shit together was when there's been many not shit together.
Yeah.
And it's been times when I've given myself away too easily to people that didn't deserve my energy and my time and my love. And that's happened a lot for me in the early part of Lou's life, you know. That happened in relationships because I didn't know my worth. I knew what I was... again, another line in a poem that I haven't finished yet, but there's a thing where I say, I know what I'm worth, but I just can't feel it. So there was a part, you know, there was times in life, because when I was younger, I fixed a lot. I tried to fix a lot of my family for certain reasons. So then you take that forward in your relationships, and I became a bit of a fixer.
Yeah, because that's where you get your worth from.
And I did get my worth from knowing that I could be of help to men. And those relationships were all purposeful for me. They all helped me grow. Only one of them was not great, and I got myself out of that situation. But all of them did end up being projects in ways. And there was a point where I realised that there was always an imbalance. It never felt equal. It never felt like equal love. And I wanted something more dynamic, and that's when I didn't give up on myself. So there was times when I didn't have my shit together in relationships, but those relationships taught me what I wanted. Yeah. So I realised that that's not what I wanted. Yeah. So the times, I'd say some of my relationships, I certainly didn't have my shit together because I was disconnecting myself from my wants, my needs and my emotions. So the more, again, that I connected, when I was trying to get my shit together, connecting with my emotional self, I'd realised so how certain relationships didn't serve me anymore, you know. And I think that would be it, really. There was times at uni I didn't have my shit together because I had complete freedom, and I'd left home and I'd left the family unit, and I just wanted to be me, and I didn't know what being me was, because I definitely played a role at home where I wanted my mum to be proud of me, and my sister had early troubles with mental health, and so I tried to be a very, very kind of, I tried to be the sibling that would just power on and study and achieve, and I wanted them to be proud of me, but there was times then when I never had my shit together, but I just didn't know how to ask. Yeah. With me, it's all deep stuff when I didn't have my shit together, Yeah. But I'd say in relationships, and I realised, because I used to give myself away too easily, and also I'd stopped doing the things I loved. Yeah. And I find that you do that in relationships.
This is resonating so hard with me. Like, I find in a relationship, I can become so disconnected from myself. Yeah. And weirdly, like, when you go through heartbreak or stuff, I might think that that's the time where I don't have my shit together, but that's actually the time where I'm, like, gathering myself together again, and I'm reconnecting with who I am. Whereas, like, if I'm in a relationship that isn't serving me anymore, and I can stay in that for far too long. Yeah. I can stay in that for far too long because I'm, like, giving and I'm giving and I'm giving, and I think I equate being a good person or being a good partner with allowing them to have access to me. Yeah, yeah. And actually...
When actually that comes with a price. Yeah. That has a currency, and that has a high currency, but understanding what that currency is when it's not been fully instilled in you. And often I think, I don't know if you know Gabor Mate, obviously many people do. He's an incredible writer on trauma-informed work. Yeah. And his book recently, Myth of Normal, phenomenal piece of writing, seminal piece of work. Took me hours. I had to listen to it on audio because it's it's like a dictionary. Yeah, yeah. But he talks a lot about healing from a toxic culture, because when you think of your parents at the time, they were only taught what the culture taught them. Yes. And culture is toxic, right? So if your parents are taught, have a stiff upper lip, don't show emotion, it's not they don't love you, it's just that that's what they're taught in culture. So when I look back, my parents loved me, they would have done anything for me, right? But they weren't great. There wasn't a lot of emotional communication in my house at all. And so I was always taught, you were taught indirectly that expressing your emotions was weak, or being that vulnerable wasn't great, and so I squashed it. And I think that if you don't express your feelings young, you don't express your needs, and if you don't express your needs, you don't gain your worth.
Definitely.
And if you don't gain your worth, you give yourself away and think people should have access to you, when actually they need to work for it.
I think it's doubly entrenched within our society in terms of like gender as well. Like I think girls are often taught to not be difficult, and like to not rock the boat, and that their needs are secondary to like a male's needs. And I think that's something that I've been really trying to unlearn within relationships as well. And it's so funny what you were saying about like therapy and stuff like that, because I was having this conversation last night with a good friend, but how, because I've had therapy, and you can feel like you do all of this work and you take 2 steps forwards, and then you'll find yourself redoing the patterns again and get really annoyed at yourself for it.
It's hard to change a pattern. Yeah. It's hard to change a pattern, and I'd say that patience with unpatterning is really important. Patience, I'd say, is an incredible virtue to own for yourself, and we can often encourage others to be patient, and we're so impatient with ourselves. But to unlearn a pattern is hard. But the fact that you recognise you're doing it means the change is pending. And I think that's how you've got to celebrate yourself. When you're like, oh my God, look what I'm doing.
That thing again.
That is progress. And we all recognise, we can all recognise progress in ourselves when we see it. And I think that celebrate those small wins. And that's what I've tried to do as I've got older. Whilst trying to get my shit together, celebrate those small wins and give thanks for even when relationships have been shit and maybe they didn't deserve you for as long as they had access to, and you didn't deserve the way they treated you, but give thanks for the lesson. It doesn't have to be given thanks to them, but just give thanks for the learning that you were able to take from it, so you've added value to yourself moving forward. And just celebrate that, and that can only be of good. And that then allows you to focus on the kind of positive forward thinking as opposed to the kind of limited fixed beliefs that we're taught, that mindset of like, we're no good or all that stuff, it will come.
That's gorgeous. Okay, 3 things that make you feel like shit.
If I don't write, actually, and obviously because I only moved, over a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I've not been writing much. I do voice note a lot. I've currently got about 700 voice notes in my phone.
Oh my God.
And it will just be things like sometimes
like
what I do.
Lines.
Well, for a laugh. Sometimes if I had a wine, I just pick a random one to listen to, and I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking there? God. And it might be something like pebble, debble, debble, do. I don't know, whatever it is. Right? I might just I might be playing with the sound, and I'm like, imagine if someone just found it. But and I mean, I'll be honest. Once I found one that it was just me saying down the voice note with pauses. I just kept saying the word orgasm, and then I'd pause, and then it'd be orgasm. And
that is a poem.
That's a poem. Yeah, I think I must have been inspired by the vagina monologues or something. But, if I don't write, I feel really shit. And it was only reconnecting with it, and as I said to you earlier, like an old friend, that I realised sometimes I need to write to think. In the same way a dancer might have to move to think, right?
It's a process.
Yeah, so and I understand how I feel better when I write. So not writing definitely makes me feel like shit.
Yeah.
If I don't eat well, if I don't have good food, I love a really good green leafy salad. Ooh. I love I'm the kind of person, I'm definitely a visual learner, and what I do is I keep old glass jars and I wash them out, of course, and then if I cook up something or make a salad, I put it into the jar and I put it in my fridge. This is when I got my shit together. So when I open the fridge, I see what I've got, and then I know I'll eat it.
That's good.
Often, otherwise things just go off at the back of the fridge.
Yeah.
So I often feel shit if I don't eat well. And feeling shit if I just, if I don't see my mates, if I don't have together time with people, and it can be one-to-one, like in this capacity, just having a good old chinwag.
Yeah.
But putting the world to rights, chewing something out, and having and knowing it's with someone who is completely on your vibration and from your tribe, so you know even if you get a bit juicy and gritty, they're not going to be offended that you're going to agree with or disagree with something they're saying. So a good conversation, and just, if I'm alone too long, like sometimes, I can feel a bit shit, but it can be balanced. I can make it go away by, doing a bit of Pilates or having a swim or, reading a good podcast, listen to reading a good podcast, reading a good podcast, listening to a good book. So all that really like simple stuff. Simple stuff. And I, at the moment, obviously I'm riding a wave of change, and I'm hoping once it's all kind of a bit more settled, I can go back to kind of seeing some mates again. And I've got nowhere for them to stay at the moment.
Hey, Ant.
Hey.
You do a great job in editing this podcast, might I say. If people like the podcast, what do they need to do?
Like it.
What else?
Follow it on social media.
And then what?
They could share it with every single person they know.
Thanks, Ant. You can go back to your corner now.
Bye.
3 things that make you feel like the shit.
When I feel listened to by anyone, that is, by loved ones, by intimate loved ones, by friends, when I feel understood, which is obviously why a platform like spoken word and a poetry platform is so great, because there were times in my life when my needs were suppressed by my family unit, and my words were silenced, and I was made to feel like my words weren't important, that they didn't matter. And that's a very, very lonely process, and it's a very shameful process actually, because you end up living with your own thoughts alone, and you feel like they don't matter, they don't count, and actually they do count. And the beautifulness of spoken word and poetry, what it's gifted me is this incredible platform where it's made me understand that my words really do matter. I'm shining a light on a story, on an era, on an area, on a subject matter, on a part of life that other people can resonate with, and that to me is brilliant. That to me fills my cup up no end. And so that makes me feel fantastic. It makes me feel the shit, the bollocks, as you say. We used to say the dog's bollocks. The bollocks. What else makes me feel great? Lightheartedly, a fantastic orgasm. Oh, yeah. Love a good orgasm.
So much so that you've recorded it in your voice notes.
Orgasm. I'm going to do that as a little segue one time on it, like a poetry thing, just like start saying, orgasm.
Yeah, people be down.
Just get everyone to start chanting it. Orgasm. 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 Have a little beat to it. But it has to be, for me, like sex has always been quite sacred to me, and I was very late in the birds and the bee game, and there was many reasons for that, but I was shy, and I one of the poems, I don't know if you've heard, was about my birthmark process, because as a kid I had a birthmark and I had laser removed.
No, I've not heard this one.
So I had a birthmark on my chin,
right,
and it really affected my self-esteem for years. And so my connection with my peers in my estate wasn't phenomenal, and some boys made me feel unattractive. So I went into the birds and the bees a lot later. My relationship with the mirror was even less, was weaker than, the most teenagers, because and a lot of teenagers struggle with a mirror anyway. And I did have low self-esteem because I saw myself how others saw me through the cherry chin, and my mum put me on the NHS and I did lasered off. So I went in the birds and bees quite late. So I learnt about sex quite late. And so when I've eventually learnt about decent, sensual, intimate sex, and like loving touch, it doesn't have to be that it's with someone that you've had this long-term relationship with. It could be something unconventional. It could be, a long-term situationship, or it could be, a lover, or it could be whoever, I think whatever works for people, if it makes you feel good and it's mutual and it's reciprocated and it's consensual, you know, do what makes you feel great. And I'd say sometimes when I've been in situations that haven't been fully conventional, like, you know, married, kids, you know, always going out on dates and always seeing each other every week and stuff like that, that's when I've had great intimacy.
Yeah.
Because I've been able to be really honest about what I need. So that makes me feel great. When I get touched well and when my body is... when my erogenous zones are touched well and when I then have a great orgasm.
It's kind of going back to what you were saying about being understood though as well, isn't it? It's like even in your body with no words.
Yeah. So like your sex being understood, your sexual need being understood. And because I guess that person who's making that effort to make you have a good pleasurable experience understands your body, honours your feminine and also honours you as a woman.
Yeah.
So that's
I
when I sometimes when I, you know, there's nothing like a lovely warm glow after a really good intimate orgasm, not, you know, where they've really listened to what you need.
Yeah.
So it's number 2.
Uh-huh.
Number 3, what makes me... Do you know, I love aromatherapy. I love a lovely bath with candles, listening to really, like, amazing music, like candles on, loads of aromatherapy, mood lighting.
Yeah.
That makes me feel great. You know, just, again, having a moment of pause, a moment of meaningful boredom.
Yeah.
Where you just sit and you stop and you sit yourself down in this rat race like what we were talking about earlier, where London's always on the go and we can fall victim to that. Like we've got to be sucked into that overproduction.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel great. You know, just pausing with myself for an evening or for a moment and just setting the scene where I'm acknowledging that I'm appreciating me.
Yeah.
You know, and that makes me feel like I got the shit, you know. And there are many other things like nice holidays.
Yeah.
You know,
Simple,
cozy
manageable
socks
things.
and a good back scratch.
Oh yeah. Love that. Okay, something that makes you lose your shit in a positive and a negative way.
Like I'm the kind of person that, as I said before, I love travelling. And I think that, but I'm someone that doesn't get excited until I'm there, standing in the middle of like a jungle or standing on a beach, and that's when I kind of, something like that makes me lose my shit. Where I'm like, I've arrived there. I'm like, I did it. I wanted to go to Peru, and I'm here.
Oh my God.
On the Inca Trail. You know, and I've done it. You know, and that to me is like, I've listened to myself. Yeah. So I've listened to me. I've heard me. Yes. And that makes me lose my shit a bit. I love that. What you said resonates. I love a good festival. I went to an incredible festival recently called Medicine Festival. It was phenomenal. And the rhythm and the consciousness that was there, and like the high vibrations and everyone, the drumming and the sound work and the everything, the sage and the Palo Santo and all the oils and that. Which, could lose my shit over that. A good scent. I could lose my shit over sniffing out a good scent of sage.
What's your fave scent?
Oh, at the moment, I love sandalwood. Anything with an undertone of sandalwood. Very nice. I've always loved patchouli. Oh. I love it. And for some reason, I love the smell of patchouli on a man. And, so many. I love jasmine. Oh, yeah. I just love it. It sends it. I can lose my shit over a really good scent.
Isn't it funny how throughout the day I don't massively pay attention to what I smell, but if I smell how evocative it can be.
Yeah, your senses. Yeah.
What's so weird is since Layla, my new housemate, has moved in, she's got the fairy washing tablets for your clothes, and like she put a wash on them the other day. I just walked in and I was like hit by the smell of my gran, like because that's what my gran used to use in Ireland, and I was suddenly just like taken back there. Yeah. And so it's like stronger than any scent in a way.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can definitely lose my shit. I'm like, what's this? And I love, like, at the moment there's a perfume brand called, a lot of people probably know it's Diptyque, and I love their perfumes, but they're extortionately priced. Their candles. I've always had this theory, like I've always had a bad track record of dating men that don't really buy gifts. Right, I don't know what that is, but I don't know if they see me as someone who's got what I need and they don't buy me gifts, right? So to anyone out there who I end up dating, my future equal dynamic lover, when you come into my life, and you ask me what gift I want, I'm going to say I love candles. Yeah. And I love Diptyque. And when you go to Diptyque and you go to the counter, you'll discover that their candles start at around £75. Oof. I'm worth it. Please buy me one day, future lover. Negative way, big ego. Big ego. And I think We all have ego. What we do, it's there.
Yeah.
The ego will always keep us in the familiar because the ego doesn't want us to take a chance on things, right? So your ego will always try and sabotage. That's what self-sabotage is. I've worked through a lot of ego stuff. It still happens sometimes, but because of the counselling stuff, it's not a hierarchical thing or anything, but I can recognise it now for myself. So then when I see it in other people, particularly if it's someone in authority, someone above you, someone who's a boss, or someone who like doesn't understand like the woes of people that have it harder, you know, like, and they just respond with complete, they respond from a place of wound, or they react, and it's all ego driven because they want power, and they don't show empathy, and they don't bring their understanding round to put themselves in someone else's point of view or in someone else's shoes. I lose my shit over that. I've got no time for people like that anymore. Yeah. Once upon a time, I would have tolerated people like that. I'd have been around them. I would have wasted time, an evening. Where now, if I'm somewhere like that and I really won't, I'm not vibing, I'll go home. Or I'll just remove myself from the situation. I'll find people that I do want to be around. But I just, arrogance, overproduction of arrogance, of self-entitled arrogance, and you know, not understanding, again, not to quote all my poems, but you know, my poems are my story, and the one about my mum where I say, you know, never judge a book by its cover. You don't, you know, the half of it, you know. You often told me to never judge a book by its cover. You might not know the half of it. The story inside distinguishes the fighter from the lover. So you don't judge judgmental people. And we all judge. We're all prejudiced in ways, but we pull ourselves, like what you were saying earlier about, like going, oh my God, I'm creating that pattern again. Yeah. There's many sides to prejudice. There's many sides to judgment. None of us are free of it. But when you're constantly committing to self-awareness, and when you're constantly committing to self-awareness growth, if you find yourself being judgmental about anything, it might be something really trivial, like someone's shoes. You know, it might be about someone's coat. It might be about someone's weight gain. It might be about someone's hair colour, right? You know, but regardless, we can all do it. Yeah. But you pull yourself into line, right? You know, and you owe yourself that. You owe yourself that to question why you're doing it. But when people don't, none of us are free of judgment, I'd say. And we all have to keep ourselves in line.
Definitely. A moment that you found some shit out about yourself.
I was again, going back to relationships, I guess. I was living in Australia. I was in a lovely beach town, working on a boat that went to the Barrier Reef, and I'd always wanted to learn to scuba dive, and I signed myself up to learn to sail and scuba dive, and I started to really understand that I had quite a lot of phobia, quite a lot of anxiety around fear of drowning and fear of sharks and fear of boats crashing and fears of not having any oxygen if I was underwater and the tank malfunctioned, and it was always this kind of catastrophising a bit, and I'd realised again I'd learnt it a lot from my early childhood, where my general belief is that my parents watched far too much Crime Watch, right, and they used to catastrophise a lot. My sister catastrophised a lot when we were young, and I found it suffocating, and I had to just get when I kind of went to uni, I was like, oh, I'm free. And so when I went and lived in Oz, I really pushed my comfort zone. And it was through understanding those phobias that I pushed my comfort zone. And I've had to overcome a lot of fear, you know, and I think through travelling I was able to do that, and through that kind of personal development. So I was going to talk about another relationship, but I realised it didn't warrant the airtime. Yeah.
Okay, shittest piece of advice you've received?
Worst advice would be like, I don't know if it's advice or it's a statement, but sometimes when people, like, I am a believer in karma. Although oddly, when my mum died, I really trashed that idea, and I was angry at God, whoever God was. I was angry at fucking karma. Karma don't exist. That would have happened, and a lot of people that bereave go through that as a stage of grief. But I do believe in karmic points, and I do believe in giving good and getting good back, and what you put out to the universe and is what you attract. And so, I sometimes believe that idea of, you know, everything happens for a reason. It has a tinge of not truth. And that idea of like, even when people say to you, even when bad stuff really happens to you, you know, it was deserved, or it was, well, no, it wasn't. Or there's a point, there's learning. Like I've said earlier, I've learnt from pain, And everything I've been through, I've taken a learning from. You don't lose, you learn. And that's a really old Buddhist proverb, and it's true. But I don't believe that you call forth badness.
No.
I don't believe. And when people say, you know...
I think especially when you live in the world that we're living in at the moment, I don't know how you can reckon that. Because that would be to say that some people are deserving of the horrors that, you know, on like an individual path sense.
And
it's
so there's
nice
something,
idea,
I don't know if that's
but I find it hard
advice.
to get behind it.
Yeah, but when people kind of rehash that idea of everything happens for a reason, yes, it does in ways, in parts. We attract what we give out. But actually, some shit stuff just happens because it's shit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I didn't attract it.
Yeah.
And I didn't deserve it. But you can learn from it.
Yeah.
And you owe yourself to rise above it and learn. But actually, something did just spring to mind. My dad used to say a saying, which is, don't do as I do as I say. And I think that's shit advice. Because some of the things my dad said was shit. Sorry, Dad, but you know that to be true. Some of the advice hasn't been great.
Yeah.
And I've learnt from not doing.
Yeah.
You know, I've like, if someone gave me a bit of bad advice, I'd go, oh no.
Yeah.
And then I'd do the opposite, you know. So, but that something will come to me after we've finished recording and I'll go, oh my God.
Always does.
That's like so the best advice, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was so the worst advice even.
Shit you wish you'd known sooner.
That you can't flog a dead horse. So when you're with someone and you're trying to make them love you, it really isn't you. It is them. It's the stuff that they've got going on that they've not processed. And you can leave a situation peacefully. I wish I'd have known my worth younger.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess that idea of youth is wasted on the young. A lot of people go through self-worth challenges. I wish I would have realised that my needs were so much more important than anyone else's.
Yeah.
And I would have walked away from situations much sooner in life because I always did kind of hang on and it served what it was. But yeah, I wish I'd have got my shit together sooner in terms of self-worth.
Yeah.
And knowing my needs were just as important and I was allowed to take up space to voice them.
Yeah.
But what I would say to people is the fact that you do realise that is the most important thing. So it doesn't matter if you're 30, 40, 50 or 60 and you realise it. If you've realised it, give yourself a pat on the back, celebrate yourself and move forward.
You've got that.
Yeah, you've got your shit together regardless of when it was.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at the point of a shit shot.
A shit shot.
So that's the photo that to the outside eye looked like you had your shit together, but at the actual time you didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a really smiley one. It's one that I've used for a couple of flyers.
Yeah.
I'm leaning against the wall. I'm really smiling. I look like I'm in the prime of everything, really happy. Yeah. And I was in that moment happy, but in the background I had a lot going on and I was grappling with having, you know, in 2017 I decided I wanted to quit teaching.
Right.
I quit this year. So for 5 years I've shouldered a job that, like I said, was just paying the bank. And I was unhappy. That was really draining me, really weighing me down. I felt like I was becoming a body robot. So that was in the background and I didn't have my shit together over that. I was feeling the ego was really playing out its self-sabotage of say you leave, say you fail, say you leave London and say you do this and this all goes to shit. And I'd go, no, I've got this. Yeah. You know, and I'd talk back to the ego, you know. So that was really playing in the background for me. I was in a huge, at a huge crossroads of, you know, this career for 10 years has held me, but I can no longer do it. And I knew that I would have to leave the city that I really love, you know, in order to have safe passage into another part, a new part of me. So yeah, that was the shit shot. But it's a nice picture.
Yeah.
And I look really like
I look fire, but
I look like fire in it, you know. And I do feel like in that moment I found present moment happiness, but there was just a lot of shit going on in the background. And it was a real crossroad pathways moment. Yeah. You know, cool. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, Lou, aka Curly Wordy.
Yeah.
Have you got your shit together?
Have I got my shit together? To be confirmed. No, I have. Incoming. I'm pending. Yeah, it's en route. I know where I want to be and what I want to do, and the shit is slowly coming together. Yeah, I feel like it's like how long is a piece of string? It's like a shit string, isn't it? It's like the shit shot and the shit string is never short. Right, it's like if you draw the short straw.
Yeah.
But if you drew the shit straw, it'd be the really long one, right?
Yeah.
So we know that to get your shit together is a long old journey.
Yeah.
Right, and so have we ever got our shit together? So it's a journey. But I feel like I'm en route to like living more authentically me.
Yeah.
Realigning back with the feminine Lou and the Lou that had these aspirations that were to do with creativity and writing and creating and co-creating, and just because just because I haven't done it doesn't mean I can't, and just because I haven't done playwright training doesn't mean I can't try and write a play, or and I just have to get the guidance on it. So just I'm walking the right shit path. You've got the shit path, you've got the shit together path, and I'm on the shit together path.
Okay,
yeah,
it's good to know. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, it's been great.
It's been gorgeous.
Yeah,
thank you.
Great. Curly Wordy, the road to the brains we live in. The road to the brains we live in are paved with so much potential. Bodyverse, corridors of doors housing the visions of the people we could become. But in order to create ourselves, invent ourselves, empower ourselves, we need to read ourselves and stop telling ourselves that feelings don't matter. The world around us fires and wires the shapes and contours of our inner worlds. Feelings are meant to be felt. Feel as things happen, not stored away for it to manifest in a different way. They need to meet the light of day. Long before we talk, we feel, because we think in feelings first. As babies, our body tracks emotions and maps our pre-verbal verse limb upon limb connected to the limbic, because emotions are the food of the body. So I ask you, what really defines intelligence? A boy who never cries, punching above his weight in maths but evaporates under the pressure. A girl who knows the Harry Potter books inside out but can't read her own, ask for help nor express her terror. What really is the true measure? Because when all is said and done and young people go off into the unknown seeking sunsets with the skill sets we gifted them, will they hold their own? Emotional intelligence paves the way with relevance, unlocks well-being, creativity, self-care, relationships, kindness, awareness and empathy. Surely that should hold the highest currency. Mind and body were only ever meant to be friends, but if we block what we feel, those butterflies in our tummy, roadblocks in our throat and car alarm chest can only cause a lot of unrest. Brain embodies body, body binds to brain, stems have to be solid from the inside to hold up a flourishing flower. We all need Maslow before we can truly bloom, so we can continue the mystery and ask the questions of who am I not to be. A seed of good soil is in all of us, so read the book in you. Caress its inner pages and review it well. Because dreams know no bookends, but feelings, they need to feel the sunlight too. So create your own proud. Stand up, get active, get outdoors, get creative, drink down that air. Steady your roots, dust off your petals, reroute if you have to. Whatever works for you, just do. But never ever give up on the project that is you.